Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week.
We're very excited.
And we're excited today. We have Rebecca Wildbear on with her. She is the author of Wild Yoga, Practice of Innovation, Veneration, and Advocacy for the Earth. She is also a creator of yoga practice called Wild Yoga, which empowers individuals to tune into the mysteries that live within the Earth community, dreams, and their own wild nature so they may live a life of creative service. She's been leading wild yoga programs since 2007 and also guides nature and soul programs through Animas Valley Institute. So, welcome, Rebecca. We're excited to have you on our podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, can you tell us a little bit about your book, Wild Yoga, that you wrote?
Yeah, well, my whole life has been a bit of a studying of various ways to connect with nature or heal ourselves, deepen ourselves, connect to our soul or truest purpose. Yoga is part of that, the body, and so my book is kind of based on all of my life experience and all of my life studies. I've been a guide for about 25 years or so. Um, and yoga teacher, psychotherapist, wilderness guide. So I'm kind of combining all of that in the practices of wild yoga. And I take wild yoga back to its roots. In modern culture, it's often thought of as just a physical exercise. And originally, yoga was like a path, and the exercise part was like one branch in the tree. But it was all about how we can become our full selves, how we can be in right relationship with everything else. And with all the realms. And in my book of Wild Yoga, I bring yoga back to that place. And also, it's a lot about listening, which isn't big in our culture, and listening to voices and aspects of the world that are often missed, like listening to our body, or listening to our heart, or listening to nature, listening to our muse, listening to the darkness, listening to our imagination, listening to soul, listening to spirit. So I'm kind of reconnecting. I offer practices to reconnect to all these deeper relationships, which bring us more fully into ourself and also give us vision for how to go forward, being with what we're truly here to bring.
That's beautiful. I like that. So then when you do wild yoga, is it somewhat like yoga in the fact that you are on a mat and you're creating your sacred space on that mat?
Yes, I do yoga practice, like asana practice. So I lead workshops and programs for people, and so sometimes I teach yoga classes too. But sometimes the yoga classes are a part of like multiple day workshops. So the yoga or the asana practice is a part of what we do, but we do a lot of other practices like deep imagination journeys, wanders in nature to listen and commune and talk to nature, ceremonies like council, to kind of deepen um, practice. And there's lots of other ones too, but often really involving the body and imagination. So, yeah, asana practice is part of it. And I often teach asana to people that I say didn't sign up for yoga. So I'm really good at teaching a yoga class to people that might be like, oh, I would never like yoga. And oftentimes I have people who do my class in various workshops. They signed up for the workshop. They weren't really sure that yoga was going to be a part of it, but they do it. And then they're like, wow, I want to take a yoga class like that one. So we break it down to a lot of simple movements that often aren't typical in yoga class that bring us more fully into the body.
Oh, that is beautiful. So everything's done in the wilderness, is what you're saying. Everything's done
Yeah,
outside and in the wilderness.
a lot of the time it is. I teach and do workshops in a lot of places. Sometimes it's in the back country, sometimes it's in a yoga studio, sometimes it's in a retreat center. And so yeah, sometimes I teach yoga just in the rough. We're right on the land. Maybe we're using yoga mats, or maybe people just have a sarong or a towel. Sometimes I teach in yoga studios where we have all the props available to us. So sometimes, obviously, out in the wild, we have the music of nature, but in a studio, we have a soundtrack. So teach in a lot of different environments. if I'm in a studio, I try to bring nature into the studio because my yoga is wild yoga. So if we're indoors, I use the imagination to bring us into that connection with our wild body and with the natural world.
So then with this, do you find that when you create that silence and bring the imagination into it, it really helps to open up people to be able to receive messages from nature, from source, that kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah, people are connecting to a greater intelligence than just our own minds. You know, whether it's connecting to nature through their imagination, connecting to their body or their deeper inner wisdom, their heart, their soul, what I call the dream time, because I do a lot of dream work too. And I always say the dream's always happening, not only at night. So sometimes we just have to get out of our own way and we can feel the dream that's happening during the day, kind of tapping into the wild imagination. So, yeah, we're listening to all these as potentially greater generators of vision and ideas and possibility than our mind, which is often the one that stays a little bit more limited in the familiar story and the familiar worries.
Yes, that is very true. We often get in our own way, I find. And I find because the world is so hectic that we don't allow ourselves the time and space to have that imagination, to have that connection with the earth, with other people, with our own selves and our own
Hmm.
bodies, and just to listen. So I think it's very exciting that you do something like this to kind of get people to connect back to themselves.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I love doing it too. It's so wonderful after I teach a class, an asana class, to see people's face like so relaxed and them to like be so dropped into their bodies and like feel in their best, fullest, truest selves. Um, just love that. Yeah.
So when you're out in nature then with the people and you're leading these retreats and these classes, then what do you encourage people to do? Like what is your goal for people and for yourself? Because I'm sure there's always something, I know as healers for ourselves, there's always something you're taking back into yourselves when you're doing these teachings and things like that. So what is it that you are encouraging for your others and for yourselves?
Well, I think one of the best things about doing it is that we're dropping into a larger relationship that we have with the wider web of life, the natural world, and like, the cosmos, the just this sense, the spiritual world, the depth of our soul, that there's a sense that there's more to life than just, this physical body and, whatever it is that we have right here in front of us that we're focused on. And so when we connect to those larger relationships, we actually can relax a little bit more into being held by something else. And then we can attune and listen. I always suggest to people who come to the programs I guide, whatever questions or hopes that you had for this workshop that brought you here, you might say, that's great. It's always good to there's something that gets us to walk in the door, but you might want to just like put them on the shelf and just be open that maybe you were called here by something else. That the land, your soul might have a greater message for you than anything you think you could get out of it. And a lot of the practices are really about listening and seeing what a person's dream world, what a person's body, what the natural world wants them to experience. I always say at my programs, nature's the lead guide, the dream world is the lead guide, your body's the lead guide, and I'm just the assistant. I'm here to help you listen to those. And it's really all about like what they're here to show you. And I do have a lot of practices for strengthening one's wholeness and resourcing somebody. Because sometimes, people can be like, well, gosh, I don't listen to my dreams because I have nightmares, it's too much. So sometimes, we have to really focus on just a lot of like grounding and resourcing to get ready for those kinds of messages. And then if we're able to just, if we have the courage and we feel strong enough to open up to, what those are. It's really great if you're feeling at all stuck, like I'm not quite sure what's next, or gosh, I'm living my life, but somehow this doesn't feel like it. It feels like I'm missing it somehow. I made this life. It's great. I put this together, but there's actually something else calling, like a deeper life. And so yeah, that's what I offer.
So do you do it under the stars too? Like, would you do like in the evening? Would you do it in the evening under the stars and that kind of thing too? Like, do you bring in all kinds of different parts of nature with that?
Yeah, I've taught an evening class under the stars before. It depends kind of where we are. If we're in a colder environment, people yoga is usually not something we do a different kind of yoga in the cold. It's more like a standing yoga posture to get warm. But the more relaxed yoga postures need a little bit warmer. So we often do that during the day if we're in an environment that's colder at night. But I have been in environments like I've taught in Costa Rica for a lot of years where it's warmer at night. And I remember this yoga deck that I taught on a lot where we did evening classes under the stars, and it's just so warm there, and we could actually hear the ocean and see the stars, and we can just really open to the darkness and the night sky.
Wow,
Beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So then if
So
somebody is searching for that part where you were saying, sometimes we feel like our lives are good, but we feel like we're missing an aspect of ourselves. Is there a way when we're getting back into nature or something that you would suggest to people to take a look at in their lives to find that missing part?
Yeah, well, partly it's just, I would say to start with, just being open to the relationship. Sometimes when we don't want to approach nature like we would approach a genie, like, hey, could you tell me about my life? Like if we went up to a party and said that to somebody, they'd be like, whoa, like, it's like first you start a conversation, like, how are you doing? Oh, nice sweater, and it's a little bit like that with nature, is that it's actually, we just kind of begin by opening ourselves up to having a relationship, which is honoring, first that these are like alive and conscious others. We might not fully understand their language or their world, but they're alive beings, which is a huge change from our everyday world, right? Which looks at nature as resources or inanimate objects. So if you could just wander out in nature as if everything is alive, that's kind of a great way to begin. And if you have these critical voices come into your head, which is not uncommon when you do something unusual that say, oh, this is just made up and oh, this isn't real. Just, maybe just let them sit on the bleachers of your life at that moment. They'll probably come back and just, ask your 5-year-old to come in and say, how would the 5-year-old of me do this? Because 5-year-olds are usually pretty good at imagining and not having to worry about if something's real or not, or if it's a worthwhile thing to do or not. They kind of play. And so we often need our inner 5-year-old to go out there and just say, okay, well, I don't know what this means, but I'm just going to go out there and imagine that everything is an alive being that I'm in relationship with. How do I want to relate? And you might wander until you feel like curious or called to something in particular. You might have a particular conversation with a being in nature. Introduce yourself from the deepest level, and just listen and see what happens next. So there's all sorts of ways to begin, but I'd say the basic strategy is really just to allow yourself to drop into that imaginal place of being in a relationship. And then once you're in that relationship, you can ask all sorts of questions about, like, well, you're really intelligent. I always see so many places in the wild world is so intelligent, and one of them is the forest. I love trees, and like those networks of connection that they have, and all the life that it's been proven that they have in them, and they're so old, and I always think they're such a great role model for love and community. We humans have a hard time, it seems like a lot of the time, if we look at the broader scope of humanity, and sometimes even a harder time just in our own head, because I don't know if you're at all like me, but we might worry about this relationship or that relationship or how to handle this or that. And trees, they just have a way of knowing how to give and also how to hold their own boundaries. And so I go to the forest a lot to ask for help with all these kinds of things, especially concerning love and relationship and boundaries. And just need to be in the presence of these ones who are so wise in all these areas. And I tell them out loud about my struggles and ask for their help. And they don't always answer my questions or tell me exactly what I want, but they tell me what they want to, they communicate what they want me to experience, and it's always somehow just the right thing.
I love that. I too, I love nature, and that was part of the way that we were brought up. Like mom would always, especially the stars and things like that, take us out. But we go camping every year, and that's like such a happy spot space for me because we are amongst the trees, and I'm out there, and I'm just like really just allowing nature to talk to me. And I talk to the squirrels and the birds. And in the beginning, my husband thought maybe he wasn't sure. But I'm just like, why wouldn't we talk to them? Because when you do, like we used to have this crow that came to our backyard in the city. And so I named him, and then I would talk to him. And then my husband started talking to him. And he'd come every night. He'd come and sit
Mm,
by us. And so to me, when you see something like that and you see how magnificent nature is and responds to us if we're open enough to it, I think that's miraculous. So I loved when I read that you listen and talk to trees. I was like, yep, she's my kind of people.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad to hear you love nature so much too. Yeah, it really is a happy place for me too. It's like whatever's going on, if I can get out and be in nature for a while, it just seems like somehow, the chaos can clear and I can step into something that really makes a lot of sense and is in a deeper resonant place.
Yes. I find there's a silence in nature too, is one of the things I think that I love in it, like especially if you're sitting out sort of like for myself early in the morning or into the evening, and you're just quiet and listening, and being able to listen to the leaves and the just it's amazing how alive nature really is if we stop and set down into that silence of it. And I agree with you. You get so many messages from it if you can just make that space for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We lived in the
It's
mountains for
true.
a while. Yeah, it is true. We lived in the mountains for a while, and it was amazing. Because you never knew what to expect. And there was cougars there and bobcats, and like we had a little bit of everything. But we had creeks close by and everything else. So it was heavy. And the snowflakes were so big they would sit in your hand, and as big as your hands. And so yeah, you can't tell people how much that they have to experience, just how beautiful it is, just to have peace and quiet and tranquility, and just nothing around you. You know, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everybody should at least one time in their lifetime. I think.
Yeah, that's great that you got to live up there. There's something too about settling into a place over time too, not even, just visiting, but actually getting to live in all the seasons and all the rhythms, the deep relationship of with place over time. Yeah.
So do
It
you,
I've
was a
lived in
beautiful place.
I
sorry.
I've lived in many different places. I live in Southwest Colorado. I've lived in Southwest Colorado for the last 20 years, but I'm originally from the East Coast. So I've lived in many different and I've visited many different places, but there is something I love about spending just a long time in a place and just getting to feel the place's rhythms.
Yeah, Colorado's beautiful, beautiful,
Hmm.
very mysterious. Driving through there and visiting through there. Been there a couple times now, and I love it. I love it. I could spend a lot more time there too. So good for you. Congratulations. A little jealous.
Hmm. Which landscape are you in?
We're in Canada, and we're close
Oh,
to the Rocky Mountains.
okay.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah, that's
so
a
we
pretty
get to.
area too.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'll just be glad when the snow is gone and I can get back to camping. And it's quite funny because I never saw myself that way. And then when I met my husband, it was like, let's go camping. Okay, sure. And now it's like, let's go camping. I can hardly wait for the weekends to get out there and just, get your bare feet on the ground and just feel that earth beneath your feet and just, I love the silence of it. And I mean, it's silent, but it's not. So
Mhm.
it's beautiful. So I love that you teach people that. And I think that a lot of people have that inhibition because I don't know if that's the right word, but they're afraid to go out and do these kind of things. A lot of people because they're afraid, what will people think? And what if I look silly? And I love that you say bring out that child within you to explore these areas and do that. So how do you kind of lead people to get into that, finding that inner child back again?
Yeah, well, a lot sometimes it's imaginally going back to the child. And sometimes it's acknowledging. I like to acknowledge that we have different voices in our psyche, right? And that's kind of part of it. It's like if we're in a relationship, sometimes it can be challenging to get along, right? You think this, I think that. But actually, we have that in our own psyche. We have the part of us that wants this and the part of us that wants that. And I was just working with a client one on one this week, and we were talking about him going out in nature. And he was like, yeah, I love nature. I've been backpacking, a while back, and I did like it. But I also have this other voice that's like, God, I just don't want to get dirty. And like, just rather stay inside. And so, you can see that's an example of how people might wrestle this one voice that like, oh, that would be really beautiful to go outside and stay in nature for a week, right? And then the other side's like, well, like that's dirt. I'll be dirty. There won't be showers, or whatever the aversion is. And just to know that we all have, sometimes these opposing voices. And so sometimes it's just sitting with it to see, yeah, but when it comes down to it, what do I really want in my life? Where do I really want to be spending my time? And just kind of when we hear those different voices, we have to kind of come to a place of, well, which way? I can see there's value on both sides, and one side will lose and one side will win something. But um, when it comes right down to it, what really matters, and what do I really value in my life? How do I want to spend my time here? And then, once we're out there, also the voices can still be there of like, oh gosh, there's bugs, or it's not quite the right temperature, or oh my gosh, it's raining now. And so how do we move with what's happening? How do we call again? Sometimes it's calling that inner child. I really think that helps. One of the wanders I invite people on in my program is I say, in your imagination, go back to the first grader who was told they have to sit in the desk all day long, day after day. You remember that you can imagine that sense. I used to work in an elementary school in my early 20s, but it's quite a jarring thing for a child to realize that suddenly they have to spend all this time in a desk. And we were all once that child, even if we can't remember it. And that 6-year-old knows what it would do if it could go outside, and knows exactly where it would go. It would have no problem coming up with something. So by the time we're adults, we've sat in a chair so long, for so many hours, for so many days, that once we're out in nature, we forgot what we want to do and we just want to go back to the chair. So, yeah, we have to kind of call that inner one who remembered how to play and explore and be curious and kind of be okay if it's not quite the right temperature, or there's a little rain, or that this is an interesting adventure.
So is there a way then if people wanted to start maybe getting out in nature more, is there something that you would suggest to them to go out in nature to start this commune with them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a little bit like you might set a date. Like you might set a date with a friend or a date with significant other. You set a date with nature to spend time. Of course, you want to make sure it's a safe place. Sometimes there are places to wander alone that aren't. So it's important to make sure it's a place you feel safe in. Or you could have a friend and you're both kind of wandering alone, but you're in shouting distance of each other. You also, it's good if, especially if you go alone, to tell someone where you go. So if something happens, you know, they know where you are. But once you're out there, I always say this might sound like, well, of course, but people don't always know this. Like, leave your headphones in the car because you don't want to be listening to music while you're out in nature. I mean, music is great to listen to, but not while you're trying to commune with nature. And this wouldn't be like a typical jog through the woods, like where you're like getting some exercise. This is more like I'm actually setting aside this time to be in nature and to commune with nature. And even if you do all that, it can still be hard because of this head up here, right? When we head out in nature, sometimes what happens is we start thinking about all the things we have to figure out. It's, we can do it in relationship, right? You can sit at the table eating dinner with your family, and instead of talking to them, you're actually just worrying and thinking about everything you need to think about. We can do the same in nature. So we're gonna do our best. And sometimes it's hard if we're stressed out, but we're gonna do our best to take our thinking mind and just say, well, those things will be there when I get back to the car to think about later. So I'm just gonna try to not think, and I'm just gonna be open and present to the beings around me. And sometimes talking out loud can help. I know that can be strange if it feels like other people are watching you or you're other people around, but hopefully you're in a private enough place where you can do that and feel comfortable. But when you talk out loud to something, just like when you talk out loud to humans, it's a little less, you're a little less distracted. You're a little less in your head because you're actually having an out loud conversation. So if you're in nature and you might be just telling a tree that you like the feel of its bark, or you might be telling the wind that you like the sound it's making through the trees, but you're engaged in a conversation, in that way with the other, and that can help bring you more present into the relationship. Other ways would be body ways, like body movement, dancing, lying on the ground, touching things, smelling things, opening your senses, but doing things like that help you be engaged in the relationship. And you make a date, an hour, 2 hours, whatever you got, set aside some time. And don't put pressure on yourself that something has to happen, because you can leave feeling like, oh gosh, nothing happened, or oh, I didn't do it right, or um, you know, just go out there and do it. It's like any other relationship. You wouldn't get up from the dinner table and say, "Oh, I didn't do that conversation right." Just let it happen. It is what it is, and just have the relationship and see what happens. You might be really surprised. A lot of what I do in my work is I hear stories from people who wander in nature, because one of the traumas that humans have is to discount our own experience, to think like nothing happened when something really did. And so it's
Mhm.
nice if you can have somebody who to share your story with, who will understand that it really is something, and it really is a great thing. Whatever, sometimes it can seem like the smallest things that happen in nature, but they're actually like huge. And when we were 5, we knew that, because the 5-year-old runs back to the house and says, mommy, daddy, guess what happened? And the adults are often like, oh, yeah, oh, okay. But the 5-year-old knows, well, that was really important. So we can, by the time we're adults, think, oh, I guess it was nothing much, but this happened. So oftentimes we need somebody else to listen and be able to say, oh, no, actually, that's really amazing that happened.
Mhm.
I love
Fair
that.
enough.
So do you think when people get out into nature and become more open to it and play a little bit more, do you think that they get more messages and become more open and see more things in nature, and then in return start honoring nature and the earth more through these practices?
Yeah, I think, a relationship with nature is like any other relationship in the way that the more we put into it and like have a relationship, the more that comes back to us. Like if you don't call your friend, or you don't talk to them, or when you're sitting with them, you just both say nothing, well, not much happens, right? But not much is said back to you. But when you start having a conversation and you open yourself and you say things, then yeah, things get said back to you. I've guided in some places where we take people a lot, and I almost feel like the natural world there feels different because it's been talked to. It's like just like a plant, or I think you can notice with a pet that gets talked to and loved versus one that doesn't is going to behave and have very different energy. It's the same with nature. It's like it's the same with humans. If we have communication and contact and care, there's a there's a way that that alters the relationship, which means it alters what the other communicates to us. So,
Mhm.
Mhm. So you talk about listening to your body and listening to the mystery within. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we can encompass that?
sure. I wrote about this a little bit in my book, but when I was 21, I had cancer. So it was a bit of a rude wake up call at that time. I was a senior in college, and I was an achiever. So we all do certain things to deal with anxiety or wanting to succeed or feel good or be loved. And I was an achiever, so I did a lot. And I was young, and when you're young, you feel like you can, be bionic and do lots of stuff, which I did. So when I was 21, I got cancer, which really knocked me down. I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and there was actually a greater chance, probability wise, that I would die than that I would live. And so I had to stop doing so many things. I stayed in college and took classes part time, but I had to stop all my activities and lower my course load. And so I had to sit more, and do less. And I started to have
Mhm.
another experience, both spiritual, soulful, and with my own body. And I began to do what I call body mind dialogues, where my mind was kind of at that time my mind was kind of the ruler, the king, and it viewed my body as the slave to just, do its bidding. And so in that illness, the balance was shifted because my body began to say, no, if this is what we're going to do, then let's just die, because this isn't, we're not really living the deeper call. Like the cancer was in the two lymph nodes in front of my heart. So it was also actually a lot about heart. If we're not going to really live a heart-centered life, with love, then what's the point, really? So it started a completely different relationship with my body because I had to slow down and not just make myself do stuff, but actually really listen to what my body was willing to do. Um, So yeah, and now I still feel that there's this relationship between, what my body wants for my life. My body is more the one that's about pleasure and slowing down and doing less and actually like sensually experiencing life. Like I'm a swimmer. I love to swim. I'm a big swimmer. I just love the feel of water on my skin. And so my body's happy when I give it time to be in the water. And it's like the body is a member of my inner community, and so um, I have to include what it wants um, in my life for a happy life because it gives me a lot too. And the body, I believe, also holds mysteries in us. You know how they say in trauma that issues are in our tissues. So there's a lot in our body. Like it's like our conscious mind isn't aware. It's only the ego can only take in so much to be conscious of, and everything else is hidden in the shadow, in the dream time, in the cosmos, in the body. And we're trying to awaken so we can listen to these things, but we can take only so much. So we're listening to our body, and definitely if we have a pain or an illness, that's always a hard time to listen because usually it's the body like that's like, hey, I'm really trying to get your attention now, just like a nightmare in the dream time. Hey, like I'm really wanting you to pay attention now. So it's good if we can even listen before that, but of course that usually pulls our attention a lot. Like what's going on here? What's happening? What's the body trying to say? I believe there's also all sorts of things. I've done body work with people. There's past lives sometimes that live in our bodies or ancestral energy. And there's also just mysterious things that come up when we listen to our body, just kind of a connected to the waking imagination and the dream time that, could even be a visionary kind of experience through the
Mhm.
body. So there's all sorts of possibilities. And again, it's just like cultivating a relationship, like we were talking about cultivating a relationship with nature. That's one whole piece. And then it's cultivating a relationship with my body. And my body is like kind of nature because it's like it's a wild animal too. And it's connected, cellularly, it's related to the elements of the earth. So can I have, and we're kind of these strange creatures, right? Because we're part civilized, we've been raised in culture, and then we're also still part wild. So we're trying to sometimes to be civilized. Some of the wildness in us has been culled in the same way that it can happen in nature and other wildlife. So we're almost trying to reclaim those parts of ourselves that they have gifts and possibilities. They're not just these bad parts that were cast out, but actually they contain a kind of genius if we can get back in touch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it's really interesting with our bodies because when we listen to, and like for mom, you love swimming, mom's is exercising and just, feeling her body move in that way. And I like to dance around and feel that the music kind of vibrating through. So I think there's always ways to bring that movement into our lives. And I think the more we listen to our bodies, when we do have something that pops up like that, mom had lung cancer, and so it was really about the breath, right? And so
Mm.
really paying attention to that for her. And so I think it's just interesting how our bodies speak to us if we really listen, like you said, just like nature, but we so often just try to silence them or not even try to silence them. I agree. Like there's all kinds of stuff that are going on in our mind all the time, and finding that space to just set a little bit of time away just to try to put them somewhere else and reconnect, I think is important. So I think what you're doing is an amazing thing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So, I guess the other thing that I would say then is, so when you're listening to your body, do you think is there a practice that we should be doing to do that? Or how would you suggest to people to like kind of get into that space where they are connecting with their body?
Well, I lay down on my yoga mat a lot as a way to do that. And my relationship with my yoga mat is such that it's like I don't have to do yoga. It's not like I'm lying down because I'm going to go do an exercise. I'm just lying down to get into my body. It's usually to slow down because usually life is so busy. So the first I might do some more faster asana after I rest, but I might not. I'm not there. I don't have an agenda to force my body into anything. It's just time to lie down and stop doing other stuff and just actually close my eyes and listen. And it's just amazing. Like there's often tears that come out of my eyes. It's like my body is saying, "Oh, finally. Oh, thank goodness." So sometimes now I have hammock yoga. You can see it hanging there. Sometimes
Okay.
now I actually lie in the hammock and I start there. It's rocking and it feels really good to be like held and closed in. Um, I
Almost
don't
like
do it
you're
as
in a
often.
mother's womb.
Exactly. And there's just this gentle rocking that really feels so yummy to start there. Sometimes I don't do it as often, but sometimes I'll even take a hot bath with essential oils and salts and music, and that's almost like a big pleasure kind of check-in moment. Sometimes a moment of just checking in or a moment of prayer. So I'd say these intimate, quiet body experiences where we just are giving our bodies something that feels good. And like I said, it could be as much as just lying down and not having to do something. It's a little different though than maybe like say lying down and going to sleep, although that's wonderful too. But when you lie down or lying down and trying to go to sleep, because again, you have an agenda. I'm talking about, just lying down and being with your body. You don't have to do anything particular, but be with your body, breathe, and just see what happens. See how your body feels. Notice if there's any like movements that want to happen. It's kind of like a just a check-in and a letting your body lead. Often when I do yoga classes, I lead people through asanas, and then I get to that point in the class where I'm like, okay, now just see what your body wants to do next. This is the most important yoga of the day, to just, you know, let your body do whatever it wants and see if you can check in. Only you don't have to do the whole asana class first. You could just lie down on your mat and start there.
Yeah. Shavasana first.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes I used to say that in my workout class. Can we just do Shavasana? She's like, no. All right. Different class then. But I love
Well,
that.
yeah. Well, maybe that's what you're longing for. Maybe give that to yourself. Turn on your favorite music and give that to yourself. It's so hard to give it to ourselves, I find, even as a yoga teacher, because the mind is like, oh, but we got so much to do and there's just no time for that. So it really takes a lot of discipline to say, actually, we're going to make time for that because it's really important. Just like you'd make time for somebody else that you consider important, like, oh, I'm going to go do that for this person because that's really important, or I'm going to take care of this for this person. Actually, this body's important, so I'm going to give, this 30 minutes to this body. I'm going to put that right in. That's important. It's easier said than done, but it's vital and it makes so much difference.
It is. I mean, I have a morning practice and I do it faithfully every single morning. Doesn't matter where I am. I do it every single morning. But I made that time because in the beginning, I was like, I don't have time to do that. I'm like, well, sure you do. Get up half an hour earlier, 15 minutes earlier, right? Like just carve out just that little bit of time for yourself to honor yourself, your body, your mind, your spirit, what have you, because you're exactly right. We do so much for other people that we put ourselves last on that priority list. And I think it's important to start remembering we need to put ourselves first or, at least at the top somewhere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yes. So can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me at my website, which is just my name, www.rebeccawildbear.com. Also, I have a Substack newsletter, so you can join my newsletter. I usually publish something every month and include my online and in-person program offerings, which are also listed on my website. And you can also see me on my YouTube channel too, where I post videos every so often. And this is what my wild yoga book looks like if you feel called to
Doesn't it?
dive in.
I
Yeah,
wanted to see
a
it.
lot
What
of
really?
there's a lot of autobiography in here, and as well as it's a book of practices for you, themes in every chapter. There's 3 sections: uh, rewilding ourselves, um, saying yes to the holy longing, which is like the spirit and soul journey, and giving to the world is the last section, the 3rd section.
That sounds like an
So,
amazing book. And you can get that on like Amazon or any of your bookstores. Yeah.
yep, exactly. There's a place on my website. It'll link to different places, but yes, it's on Amazon and most places you can find it.
Wonderful. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, and I think, your message is really strong for people, to kind of get back to being a little bit more wild and being a little bit more youthful. So, if you had a final word for everybody or thought, what would it be?
Well, I would just say that I like to say wherever you are, whatever you're up to in your life, these practices are available to you. Sometimes it can be easy to feel like, oh, I'm this or I'm that, or it's too late for me, or I'm this far gone. But actually, these practices are here and they're accessible to everyone. And they're part of our intrinsic inherent nature as humans. I mean, I'm not really saying anything hugely like brand new that our ancestors way back a long time ago that lived close to the earth didn't know about these relationships. So I'm bringing it back. And that's all in our DNA. We all have those connections, those original relationships. So and it's such a great gift, no matter what else is going on in life, to always have these connections. So I hope you enjoy practices.
Wonderful.
Thank
Well, thank you so much. It was just great spending time with you. We really do appreciate it. We hope you come back and as you're moving through your journey and, doing more things, we'd love to have you back to talk about that. So thank you.
Yes, that
Thank
would be
you.
so
Thank
lovely.
you.
I really do like your cover too, but on your book.
Yeah, thank you. That's my
That's
my friend Doug Van Houten with New World Library. They did this cover. So it's I love it too. Trees are
yeah, I
my
love it. Yeah,
tree relationship.
Well, that is perfect. Well, thank you again. And everybody else, we will see you the next time.
you bet.